Um, so as I was saying, welcome to the Erasmus Info Day for Higher Education Institutions. And we're just going over the different paths that you can take in Erasmus. So we talked about mobility, joint and double. We'll be talking more about mobility, joint double degrees, and different types of key action 2 projects. And of course, we have Jean Monnet, which is focused on European Union studies and research. So this is a very specific, these are a very specific types of calls. There are several calls, and we've had actually a special info session with a representative from the agency that is responsible for Erasmus in Brussels, specifically for Israeli stakeholders 2 weeks ago. So Noga, my colleague, will be sharing the link for that in the chat. And if any of you are interested in Jean Monnet, we won't be discussing it today at all, but there's a very insightful info session that we've had already on Jean Monnet, and I invite you to watch it in the near future, if you want to apply this year. So Erasmus Plus achievements. So Erasmus Plus has been active for a decade now, and we have currently over 1,000 active mobility agreements between Israeli and European higher education institutions. Altogether, Israeli partners have been part of grants of 131 grants that were awarded through the program. Over 70 million euros were invested in Israel and in projects involving Israel through the Erasmus Plus program. And there are at least 400 universities that are active and cooperating with Israel, and over 90% of the higher education institutions in Israel are active in Erasmus Plus in one of the calls, at least in one way or another. So when we look at the map of the world, you can see that us, Israel, we're in light blue, and that the European countries plus 6 more countries that are not EU member states are in dark blue. So any type of collaboration between Israel, that an Israeli higher education institution would like to take part in needs to be collaborative with at least one EU member states. For some projects, it's even more than one. It could be 2, because one of the goals of Erasmus Plus is also enhancing the collaboration within the European Union itself. So this is something that we can find in many projects that except for mobility, where you have bilateral agreements, we'll get into that. In larger scale projects, you would be expected to find at least 2 partners from different states, European member states. So that is the base of any type of Erasmus collaboration, is collaboration with EU member states. It's not just getting funding. We're working on collaborative projects. So, as we said, we're talking about the EU member states plus 6 other countries, which are North Macedonia, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, Turkey, and Serbia, that despite the fact that they're not EU member states, they are considered countries associated to the program. Israel is not a country associated to the program. We are part of the South Mediterranean region. So with us are our neighboring countries in the region, Jordan, Egypt. There's also a national Erasmus Plus office in Palestine, in Ramallah, and Tunisia and Morocco and other neighboring countries, which we are in the region with. And with them, we can collaborate regionally, and there sometimes in several instances this is something that is mandatory. Some calls, I won't be getting into those calls. We've had also a special session on regional collaborations because specifically for us to take part in a regional collaboration requires a specific agenda and efforts and a very, very special relationship and connection to try to create regional collaboration. It needs to be like in the core of why you're actually applying to Erasmus in our case, most of the time. So in these calls, I've excluded calls that require regional collaboration. Nevertheless, if you are able to create regional collaborations, it definitely strengthens your application. Okay, so any Erasmus Plus project has to take into account at least one horizontal aspect, okay? So at least one of these, you don't have to touch upon all of these, but at least one of these has to be very clear in your application how, and these are very broad aspects, but you have to explain how your project would relate to at least one of these horizontal aspects. So there's inclusion and diversity, environmental sustainability, digital dimension. Here we're talking about, digital skills, digitalization of learning processes, and other aspects that relate to the transition to a more digital world and a digital workforce and digital learning environments, etc. And common values. When we say common values, we're talking about democratic values. We're talking about the importance of civic engagement, of participation of students, staff, and any other stakeholder or audience that the higher education institution is working with in actually forming the values and identity of the people that are involved with your project and your higher education institution. So let's talk a bit about us, about the Erasmus Plus office. So what we do is meetings like this, where we actually promote the new calls and the opportunities of Erasmus Plus. We also give individual support to institutions and individuals that are interested in taking part in Erasmus Plus. We arrange contact seminars and collaborations with EU stakeholders to promote collaboration between Israel and Europe. And another thing that we do is we bring European expertise to Israel in different aspects and fields. We're happy to share with you 2 events that are planned to take place in the near future that you can also disseminate in your institutions. One is going to focus on, it's the December, and Noga will send the links now in the chat. So one is focused on changing behaviors to promote sustainable development goals on campus. It's going to be a very interesting day. It has sessions for academic staff, for logistical staff, and also for students that want to be more active in their institutions. So I really recommend signing up and disseminating this event. And another event that we hope will actually happen. We've had some difficulties today that we realized them, but we'll share it with you anyway. And if there will be a cancellation, we'll let you know. An event that is focused on diversity and inclusion in higher education institutions with a special EU expert that has experience in constructing policy on these key issues. So these are just 2 examples of things that are happening soon. But actually, we have a forum of higher education reform experts. And what we do is we think together with the Council for Higher Education and with our experts on what would be most beneficial for higher education institutions to promote new policies and implementation and adaptation of best practices and EU best practices. So that's what we do. So without further, without further ado, let's dive into the different calls. But before we do, are there any questions? Okay, I'll take it as a good sign. So now, if you haven't been listening so far, we're actually done with the general presentations, and now I'm going to really dive into the different Erasmus Plus calls. So the first call is the mobility program, International Credit Mobility, ICM. So these are based on bilateral agreements between institutions. The forms are dealt with and managed and coordinated by the EU institution, and they need to submit these to their respective national agencies. We are not a national agency, we're just a national office because we are not a member state. We're not an associated country. So this is all managed on a country level. And as you can understand, these are bilateral agreements. So it's very, very easy to take part in this. All you have to do is have a partner that is willing to have a mobility with you. And there is a reason why we call it mobility and not exchange. Exchange implies that you have to host and you have to send, right? But mobility is very different. You can only send, you can only host, you can send student and host staff. So you can do a lot of different types of mobilities, and it's very modular. And that way, almost any institution can take part in this kind of experience. So the funding is actually for the mobility itself. It's not a very big grant, but it does cover the cost of travel and stay. And of course, if there are special issues relating to inclusion, if you have students with fewer opportunities, you can also get a top-up of payment for inclusion. For example, if you have a student that's in a wheelchair and has a caregiver that needs to travel with them, then you can also cover the costs of the caregiver and different adaptations that are needed for different types of students and staff. So what happens is you apply with your fellow EU institution, and then if you're awarded the grant, you have up to 3 years to actually implement the mobility. So you get to decide together with your partner when this will take place during 3 years. How are you going to manage it? Are you going to have, for example, if you've won 60 mobilities, are you going to do 20 per year? Are you going to do something else? Are you going to do them all at once? It really depends on what your plan is and what kind of collaboration you're talking about. Is this a joint course? Is this some kind of training period where you want your staff to go and learn and come back on a one-time basis? Is this some kind of collaboration in as part of a study program where you want all of your students in a specific department to take part and visit a specific place as part of their studies? So you can build it in any way you like. And I also want to say, because it is modular, then you have the ability to really play with it. For example, let's say that you missed the call and you now we're talking about the open call. So I do encourage you to apply with your partners and contact and also tell your staff and tell your deans and tell the different faculties that this is a good time to establish these kind of collaborations so they can reach out to their colleagues and apply together for an Erasmus mobility in this field or that field or whatever field that you think is relevant. But let's say that you missed the call and you still want to collaborate. The European partners have a lot of freedoms. They can actually say, hey, I had a mobility going with Tel Aviv University, but that didn't fell through. It fell through. It didn't work for different reasons. There was different changes, and I still have these grants. They can allocate these grants wherever they want, and they can use them with Haifa University or with Golden College or whoever they see right. And also on a regional level, right? We said earlier that we're part of a region. So say you have some mobilities with Egypt. Now the situation there isn't so stable. I don't know. I'm just giving a scenario. And they want to change the mobilities and allocate them in Israel with Levinsky College. They can do that. Okay. They have almost total freedom to manage the mobilities how they see fit. And this can also be challenging on your side because it really requires strong communication skills, and because they have the information and they are the ones that update you if you have active grants, current grants, how many grants were awarded, how they can manage it. So that's something that you do together with your EU partner, and it requires a lot of communication and collaboration. But it's a fairly easy way to start being involved in Erasmus+. Any questions about mobility? Okay, so here you have a drill down of the time scale, right? So for staff and students, it's not the same. Students can travel for up to 1 year. Most of them travel for a semester, right? And staff is usually travel for a week, right? So it's 2 days of travel, 5 days of teaching. These are pure teaching days, right? You don't take down, decrease the 2 days of travel out of the minimum 5 days of the physical mobility, but they can also travel for a full 30 days. And there's also a possibility of having blended mobilities where you send the students for a few days and then they continue their studies online. That's something that's possible, for example, for students with fewer opportunities that can't afford the costs or for different social reasons can't leave their family houses for more than a week or so, and not being able to travel for a full semester. Okay. So now we're going to dive into key action 2, cooperation among organizations and institutions. So here's an example. The Neurodata joint degree, which we're very proud of, that Bar Ilan is the coordinator of, is an example for an Erasmus Mundus joint master's degree. Short, we call it the abbreviation EMDM. This gives you the ability to actually develop a joint degree. It's for excelling students. As part of the funding, you also get grants, full grants for excelling students that take part in this program. It's a very exclusive program. It brings you into a very small circle of EMJM coordinators, and also a lot of international student engagement and interest in your institution and in your degree. I don't have here the statistics of Bar Ilan, but we're talking in the thousands of students from all over the world that try to apply to this degree. So you get the grant for 74 months to operate this joint or double degree. You get student scholarships and you get additional support for students that require extra funding. It's a very generous grant, and one of the prerequisites here is that the students study in at least 2 EU member states or associated countries. So the Israeli institution is the third country that the student will be learning at. So you have to build it in a way that, first of all, makes sense, and second of all, there's an added value to each institution where the student travels and studies in. It's a master's degree, so obviously it's shorter than a BA program. So you really have to make it something very, very unique. And the student needs to study in at least three countries, 3 separate countries, 2 of which are 2 different EU member states or associated countries. Okay, so now we're talking, because it's very difficult to create a joint master's degree. It needs a lot of bureaucracy and accreditation and discussions. There is also an EMDM. This is a complementing grant. It doesn't mean that you're going to win the EMJM after you are granted the EMDM, but through the EMDM, the Erasmus Mundus design measures, you actually apply to build a joint or double degree. So you get funding, 60,000 euros for 15 months. That only covers, the costs of getting together, meeting, working on the program, because the European Union understood that to build such a large project that once it's granted needs to hit the ground running, you have to have the infrastructure first. And that actually raised the need to create the EMDM call. Okay. Any questions on EMJM, EMDM?
Yes, I have a question, please.
Yes.
It's regarding a previous slide
Yeah.
about the period of time, the needed period of time for student. Is there any flexibility, meaning being less than, I believe, few months? I don't remember
Are you
the
talking
exact time.
about mobility?
Yes, please, about mobility.
Yes. So
Yeah, this one.
yes. So they have the option to travel for a blended mobility. This means they do a full semester, but the actual physical attendance in the hosting institution would be shorter. So they can go to a week or 2 weeks, a minimum 5 days. And then they go back home and continue their joint international studies online.
And
Okay?
in case the blended is not an option, can we go with option 2, but less than 2 months?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so
Enough. I also have a question about
yeah,
the
sure.
EMDM. I wrote it also in the chat. Could you please,
Okay.
yeah, okay, but could you please elaborate a bit about the scope of the application? How many pages have to be written? What has to be included? This would help us to better market it to our researchers.
Okay, that's a good question. I'm not sure about the pages. I can get into that for you. But it's as you can see, like it's not a big grant. It's not a huge amount of money. We're not talking about 1 million euros. So I think naturally the application is a bit shorter. There's also just one applicant. You don't have to have all the like in other projects, each member has to be part of the like to be part of a consortium that you apply for and everything. But in EMDM, all you need is just one partner that it's an EU member state or associated country that is the coordinator, and that is the single applicant. They apply for the entire consortium. They just have to specify, give an idea of, these are the institutions that we are planning on collaborating with. With them, we are planning to apply for the EMJM going forward. And this is what we plan to do to get there and to build the project. So they need to sell, sell what they're planning on doing, what is the field of the EMJM going to be, who are going to be potentially the partners, but it doesn't force them on when they submit the EMJM, they can change, many things. They can change the partners, they can change the study programs. I mean, after building it and getting into it. So I think it's not a very difficult grant to apply for, the EMDM. EMJM is very competitive. And of course, it depends like how cutting edge is the topic, how advanced are the degrees, who are the partners, does the study program make sense in the training of the students and their experience and what they gain, and how is it different from what is already existing and already funded. So that's things you need to take into account when you're applying for an EMJM. And of course, you need to think about these things also when you're applying for the EMDM. But the EMDM, as I said, you don't have to have all the answers yet. You just have to really explain what are your needs and why and what you're planning on achieving at the end of the funding period, which is to apply for the EMJM. Okay?
And now we have another question in the chat.
Okay. What's the question?
What is the difference between the mobility program of the Erasmus program to the mobility program of Marie Curie in the Horizon?
Okay. So these are completely different programs. But I'm very glad for that question because many times I like to explain Erasmus as what it is not, right? So Horizon is a program that aims to develop research and joint research. And Erasmus is actually not research. So we're talking about all the other capacities that higher education institutions need that are not research capacities. They don't fund research. So we're talking about teaching, we're talking about services for students, we're talking about inclusion, we're talking about, you know, a very, very wide range of things that you can develop in your higher education institutions that are not related to research. So we're talking about academia industry collaboration, right? Networks, internationalization. So I'm just giving you a lot of examples of things that we do need to develop within our institutions, but that are not research oriented in the sense that they're funding research. So Marie Curie allows for mobility, but it's a mobility that aims to develop joint research. And when we're talking about staff mobility through Erasmus, we're talking mostly for purposes of teaching and also for purposes of training, right? So this training is a very broad aspect. So it could be how to teach better. It could be how to use labs. It could be how to incorporate different stakeholders in study programs or so it's very, very diverse. It's very, very open, but it's not oriented to research and it has its own funding rules that are different from Marie Curie and different requirements. I think that in general, I very much promote Marie Curie. I don't want to say anything bad about it. I think it's a wonderful program. You should use both. You should utilize both. And I think through Erasmus, it's a bit more flexible and modular. The length and the ability to send and host for different periods of time or for shorter periods of time. But I don't know enough about Marie Curie to really give the comparison. I can only say that it's independent from Marie Curie and it has its own agenda. I hope I answered the question. Okay, so now I'll be going into virtual exchange. So this actually requires regional collaboration, right? So you need to involve at least one higher education institution or youth organization from a neighboring country. And at least just one EU member state or associated country. So the minimum. Oh, sorry, yeah. No, I was wrong. So two EU member states. I was confused with capacity building and youth. So still you need the 2 EU member states from different states and another partner from a regional country in our region. So I think it's very challenging to actually apply for this program, but we do have a successful project called the Impact Project that is joint with Morocco. I really recommend learning more about that, and Noga will also send you a link to that project. But the goal here is to create intercultural dialogue and meetings that are online. So it's much more accessible and really promotes inclusion. So it's a wonderful project. If it's relevant for you, it's relevant for you. If you need help finding regional partners, we can always try to help you and connect you. So if you're interested in a project like that, you can contact us and we'll be happy to assist. So now this is kind of the flagship project in the flagship program, which is capacity building in higher education. These are consortiums that are aimed at developing higher education within the neighboring countries to the EU, meaning Israel. You can have a national project, you can have a regional project, and you can also have a cross-regional project where you involve also other neighboring countries like India, Kosovo, Georgia, and countries that are also neighboring countries to the EU. But it could also be a national project, meaning you involve only Israeli institutions and, of course, 2 institutions from the EU from different states. So this is a very, very wide umbrella of projects that really is up to your creativity and the needs that you have within the capacities that you actually lack within your higher education institution that you would like to develop and bring expertise from the EU for a 3-year project or a 4-year project, depending on the different strands that are available, to promote different topics. And now I will be, just to give you a taste of an example, I'll show you a video of the William Project. The William Project focused on internationalization at home, how to give international skills to students that are not traveling abroad, but still need to build their international capacities. So that's just an example. It doesn't mean that this is the field that you need to choose. Just see what they came up with at William, and it's a very cute video. So let me just share it with you. 1 second. Wait, no, I think I didn't share the audio, right? Yes. Okay.
אקשן!
שלום לכם. אנחנו ממשיכים בתנופת הבינלאומיות במכללת תל חי, ובמסגרת פרויקט וויליאם של האיחוד האירופי, קיבלנו מענק לפתוח כיתה וירטואלית עם טכנולוגיות מתקדמות ממש פה. אבל רגע, אתם זוכרים איך זה היה נראה פעם? אז בואו ניכנס. הכיתה מאפשרת למידה באמצעים מגוונים. אבל רגע, מה עם האורות? 10. אפשר להעביר קורס לסטודנטים שלי. ואפשר לצרף גם את הסטודנטים שלנו מחול. אנחנו נראה אותם כאן. Good morning!
Hi, good morning, Uli. Did I say that? But I got it.
ואיך הם שומעים אותנו? שימו לב, אתם שומעים אותי מפה? 1, 2, 3? ואיך הסטודנטים בחו"ל ישמעו את הסטודנטים שלנו בכיתה? דרך המיקרופונים. הסטודנטים בחו"ל רואים אותנו כך, כמו בתוכנית טלוויזיה. המצגת משודרת על המסך מאחוריי, וגם בארץ וגם בחו"ל אפשר לראות אותה. ועל הכל אני שולט מהעמדה הזאת. ויש לכם אפשרות לראות את עצמכם במסך מולכם. מגניב, אה? אתם לא חייבים לפתח קורס שלם בעברית או באנגלית. אתם יכולים לשלב אורח, קולגה מהארץ או מחו"ל, כמו למשל זאת.
שלום, תל חי, שלום מולי.
סטודנטים, תודה. פונקציה נוספת זה האפשרות להפוך את הכיתה לאולפן צילומים. זה יכול להיות קורס שלם מקוון או יחידות הוראה בודדות. הטכנולוגיה כאן תאפשר חוויית הוראה חדשנית ומתקדמת. אתם יכולים להראות את המצגת מאחוריכם ולשלוט עליה. אתם גם יכולים להיות במעבדה, ספרייה, או אפילו על החוף בתאילנד. בינינו, זה הכי קרוב שתגיעו לחו"ל בקרוב. אתם חושבים שזכרתי את הכל בעל פה? יש לנו גם טלפרומפטר כדי שלא תשכחו שום דבר בזמן הצילומים. השקענו המון משאבים בכיתה הזו כדי בראש ובראשונה לקדם את תל חי בתחום הבינלאומיות, אבל גם לטובת העבודה כאן בישראל, בקורסים בעברית. אני מזמין אתכם לצאת מאזור הנוחות ולהגיע למקומות נפלאים.
אוקיי, אז כן, אז זה סרטון שאני מראה הרבה, ממש ככה בצורה מאוד ברורה, ממחיש איך אפשר לקחת תקציבים לציוד ולשיתוף פעולה בינלאומי, וממש לייצר תשתיות במוסדות שלכם ושירותים שניתנים אחר כך לסטודנטים, ויש להם גם ססטיינביליות שהם גם נמשכים אחר כך לאורך שנים, גם הרבה אחרי איזה פרויקט שכבר הסתיים, והכיתה הזאת תיאורטית עדיין יכולה לשמש. האמת שנגמר לנו הזמן, ואני לא רוצה לגזול מההפסקה שלכם, אז אם יש שאלות, אז אפשר, אני אשאר כאן בזמן ההפסקה, ואם לא, אנחנו גם, יש עוד סשן, אני כן ממליצה להישאר לסשן הבא, שקצת נדבר יותר על טיפים קונקרטיים, שנוגעים גם לקולות הקוראים, אם שינויים נעשו בהם, עם טיפים ביחס לזכיות או האי זכיות, שיש לנו, בקיצור, דברים קצת יותר קונקרטיים לנו לקראת ההגשה. אז אנחנו עכשיו יוצאים להפסקה עד 10:30, ומי שרוצה לשאול שאלה, אני עדיין כאן. אז ענת, כן.
כן, אוקיי, סליחה שאני, באמת בשבילי זה שדה פתוח. הבחור מתל חי, אוקיי? הם הגישו בקשה ל-capacity building עם מוסדות אחרים, וכל המוסדות קיבלו את הציוד הזה? אני לא כל כך...
לא. אז אוקיי, שאלה מצוינת. אז א', גם במכון לב הם יצרו כיתה כזאת, שהיה שותף, אבל נגיד בבן גוריון שהיו שותפים הם לא יצרו את זה, כי היה להם כבר תשתיות קיימות. בעצם בתוך ההגשה שלכם, הרעיון של capacity building, זה שאתם קובעים מה היעדים, כן? אתם קובעים מה ה-deliverables שלכם, כאילו. אתם רוצים להקים X כיתות כאלה, אתם יכולים גם להגיד, בשביל השותפים האלה יש צורך לפתח את זה, ובשביל השותפים האלה יש צורך לפתח משהו אחר. כלומר, היופי בפרויקטים ובפרויקטים של capacity building זה ש you make the case, אתם כאילו אומרים, מה הצרכים, אתם מנמקים את זה בצורה מאוד ברורה, ואתם גם מנמקים מה יהיה ה-deliverables שלכם, כאילו מה יהיו התוצרים שלכם, וגם לזה אתם מחויבים אחר כך בהמשך הדרך. אבל היו כמה כיתות כאלה שהוקמו במסגרת וויליאם, כן. כי גם חלק מהרעיון שכל מוסד יפתח אצלו את הדבר הזה, וגם איזשהו אלמנט קולברטיבי של אנחנו עובדים על זה ביחד, ואנחנו משתפים אחד את השני בידע, ואנחנו מייעצים אחד לשני, ואנחנו נוסעים לאירופה לעבור הכשרות ביחד, ועושים בריינסטורמינג על איך אפשר לעשות את זה. עוד דוגמה לפרויקט, זה פרויקט סיפי, פרויקט שעכשיו הסתיים, שנועד לקדם את בריאות הציבור, והוראה של בריאות הציבור, בסטנדרטיזציה של הוראה של בריאות הציבור. הם הרגישו שכל מוסד מלמד משהו טיפה אחר, שלא בהכרח מתממשק עם הצרכים הלאומיים, וזה עוד פרויקט שנעשה לפני קוביד, כאילו זה פרויקט שהוגש לפני קוביד, והיה פעיל כשהקורונה פרצה, כלומר הרלוונטיות הייתה גבוהה מאין כמותה, והצורך חשיבה על דור העתיד של מומחי מדיניות ציבור, ומי אנחנו מכשירים ואיך אנחנו מכשירים אותם, איזה קורסים בכלל אנחנו מציעים בכל מוסד, ולייצר סטנדרטיזציה והרמוניזציה של זה, זה צורך לאומי, כן? בסוף כל מוסד עושה את ההתאמות שלו. יכול להיות שיש מוסד שצריך לשנות הרבה, יכול להיות שיש מוסד שצריך לשנות מעט, אבל הרעיון הוא לחשוב על הנושא הזה בצורה רחבה יותר.
כלומר, אנחנו בעצם יוצאים מתוך נקודת המוצא שלנו הוא איזשהו צורך, איזה משהו שאנחנו רוצים להגיע אליו, איזשהו סטנדרט. אנחנו מוצאים לנו שותפים לפי מספר השותפים בישראל ובאירופה, ואז אנחנו עושים את ההגשה המשותפת.
נכון. כאשר גם פה, כלל מפתח, כלל אצבע זה, קונסורציום רחב, יכול לרמז ולהעיד על אימפקט גדול יותר, כן? אם את מכניסה, דרישת המינימום היא רק 2 מוסדות בישראל, אבל נגיד אם את מתכננת לעשות לדוגמה סטנדרטיזציה של הוראת בריאות ציבור, זה ברור שאת צריכה קונסורציום רחב, זה ברור שאת צריכה לערב את כל המוסדות שמלמדים בריאות ציבור, הם אפילו צירפו את ארגון הרופאים, כאילו הם ממש חשבו ביחד איך הם יכולים לייצר משהו שאחר כך יחולל שינוי ממש באיך שמלמדים את המקצוע הזה. טוב, אז נצא עכשיו להפסקה, יהיה עוד זמן לשאלות, אני מבטיחה.
אם את לא יוצאת להפסקה, רציתי לשאול שאלה.
אוקיי, קצרה, כן.
אושרת ממכללה האקדמית גליל מערבי, לנו יש מוביליות של סגל וסגל מנהלי עם מדינות שונות בהסכמים שיש לנו איתם.
כן.
אם אני רוצה להמשיך ולנסות לעשות או לשנות, לעשות איזשהו משהו, ממה אני מתחילה? איך אני ניגשת לזה? איך מגישים?
מה זאת אומרת לשנות?
אני כן רוצה לעשות איזשהו, כמו שאמרנו, איזשהו משהו שאנחנו רוצים בקונצנזוס רחב למספר ארצות,
פרויקטים.
אנחנו רוצים לעשות איזשהו פרויקט. איפה
כן.
אני מתחילה? כאילו נקודות של מה עושים, 1, 2, 3.
אני לא סתם מורחת אותך, אנחנו באמת ניכנס לזה בסשן הבא, ואם אני לא עניתי לך על השאלה, אז תשאלי אותי עוד פעם, בסדר?
אוקיי,
טוב,
תודה.
אז נצא להפסקה קצרה ונחזור ב15:30. אז בוקר טוב, כמו שהבטחתי, אני אציג את המצגות באנגלית, אוקיי? I will be presenting the presentations in English, not to worry. Just now for the greeting session, I'll speak in Hebrew. בכל זאת, אנחנו כאן בישראל, אני מאמינה שכולם דוברים את השפה ברמה כזו או אחרת. אז קודם כל, אני רוצה רשמית לפתוח את היום הזה, כי כן היה לנו סשן ל-Newcomers מוקדם יותר, ורובכם כבר הצטרפתם אז, כי אתם קהל מאוד נאמן שמגיע לכל האירועים, אז תודה על זה. ואני רוצה שניגש לחלק הברכות של היום הזה, שהוא אומנם מקוון, אבל אנחנו עדיין מאוד מאוד שמחים לארח כאן את הקולגות שלנו משגרירות האיחוד האירופי. אז אני אעביר את המיקרופון המדומיין לדפנה פרי משגרירות האיחוד האירופי, לומר כמה מילים.
היי, תודה רבה עינב שהזמנת את משלחת האיחוד האירופי לישראל לומר כמה מילים. אז אני אציג את עצמי, קוראים לי דפנה פרי, אני מנהלת תוכניות במשלחת. טוב, זה קצר. תוכנית ארסמוס פועלת מאז שנות ה-80 המאוחרות, והיא, כמו שעינב תמיד אומרת, זה מעמודי התווך ביחסים בין ישראל לאיחוד האירופי. בכל שנה מאות סטודנטים, מרצים וחוקרים מישראל מבקרים באירופה במסגרת ארסמוס פלוס, ועוד מאות סטודנטים, מרצים וחוקרים אירופאים מבקרים בישראל. אבל כמו שחלקכם יודעים, זו תוכנית שלא מסתכמת רק בביקורים הדדיים, זו תוכנית שהולכת ומתרחבת משנה לשנה ושואפת לקדם שיתופי פעולה מתמשכים בהשכלה ולבנות את היכולות של כל השותפים, ואולי הכי חשוב, גם בתקופה הזאת, לבנות גשרים בין מדינות ובין מוסדות ובין קהילות ובין אנשים. ואולי מהצד שלי זו הזדמנות להזכיר שארסמוס פלוס היא תוכנית אחת מתוך מגוון מאוד מאוד רחב של תוכניות במימון האיחוד האירופי שפועלות בישראל, או שהן פועלות באופן שפתוח לישראל, ויש הרבה מאוד תוכניות אחרות שעשויות להיות רלוונטיות למוסדות להשכלה גבוהה ולארגוני חברה אזרחית כמוכם. יש לאיחוד האירופי תוכניות למימון מחקר ופיתוח, יש תוכניות לקידום חברה אזרחית, זכויות אדם, דמוקרטיה, שלום. זה באמת עולם שלם של הזדמנויות, ואני יודעת שלא תמיד קל לעקוב אחרי כל ההזדמנויות האלה, אבל אנחנו במשלחת כאן בשביל לנסות להנגיש כמה שיותר מידע באמצעות האתר שלנו, וכמובן אתם מוזמנים לבקש מעינב והיא תיתן לכם את פרטי הקשר שלי, אתם מוזמנים ליצור איתי קשר באופן אישי. אז זהו ממני, אני רוצה להודות ולברך את משרד ארסמוס פלוס בישראל, שבאמת עושה עבודה נהדרת בהנגשת המידע על התוכנית הזאת. ואני מאחלת לכם יום מידע פורה ומעניין.
תודה רבה רבה דפנה, אנחנו מאוד מעריכים את שיתוף הפעולה הזה, ועכשיו אני רוצה גם לבקש לפנות ולתת את המיקרופון ליו"ר ות"ת, פרופסור יוסי מקורי, שגם נמצא איתנו כאן היום.
בוקר טוב, שמח לראות את כולכם בזום וכמובן מברך אתכם. אנחנו בוות"ת ואני באופן אישי רואים חשיבות גדולה ביוזמה והפעילות של ארסמוס, בעיקר בימים אלה כאשר אנחנו חשופים למצב הבינלאומי של האקדמיה הישראלית, כמובן חרמות ונידויים והגבלה בהרבה מאוד פעילויות, כולל הפעילות שלנו. אנחנו כגוף ממלכתי, ממשלתי אם תרצו, גם זוכים לתשובות לא נעימות מגופים שונים אירופאים שאנחנו מנסים לבקש את השירות שלהם ולשיתופי פעולה וכולי. לכן הפעילות שלכם היא בעלת חשיבות יתר בימים אלה, משום שברור לנו לחלוטין שבניגוד לתגובות המוסדיות, אנחנו יודעים שיש שורה ארוכה של מדענים ושל, הייתי אומר, חוגים ומחלקות בתוך המוסדות שכן מעוניינים בשיתוף פעולה איתנו, כפי שעשו את זה בעבר. ולכן אני מייחס חשיבות יתר דווקא לשנים הקרובות, על השנה הזו, לפעילות שלכם ועל היכולת שלכם והאפשרות שאתם תוכלו למצוא שותפים בנושאים רלוונטיים שיחד יתרמו למערכת ההשכלה הגבוהה ולערכים שאנחנו רוצים להוביל כאן בחברה הישראלית. אז אני באמת מאחל לכם הצלחה בהגשות העתידיות שלכם, ושוב רוצה להעריך ולהוקיר ולהודות על התרומה שלכם בעצם היוזמה לפתח קשרי מדע בינלאומיים בינינו לבין גופים אירופאים. אז עלו והצליחו ובהצלחה בכנס היום. ושוב תודה למחלקה שלנו שבראשותה של עינת, שבאמת עושה ימים כלילות לקדם את הנושא, למרות הקשיים שאנחנו חשופים אליהם בימים אלו. תודה.
תודה רבה, פרופסור מקורי, מאוד מעריכים את התמיכה והחיזוק. ובוקר טוב לכולם. אני אעבור לאנגלית עכשיו, בגלל שהסקר שלכם הצביע על זה שיש עדיין חבר'ה פה שהאנגלית זה יותר קריטי, אז המצגת תהיה באנגלית. אם יהיו כל שאלה או אי בהירויות, אז אפשר כמובן לשאול אותי, ואני אענה גם בעברית. So, good morning to all. I will now share our presentation, and now we begin the session of general updates on Erasmus+. So before we've had a session discussing and presenting the different calls, and now we'll jump into more general updates that are still relevant to the audience from before, and also to experienced Erasmus+ participants and stakeholders. So first, I want to open with the congratulations to the awarded grants in the last call. So as you can see, we have many cooperation partnership calls that were granted. I also mentioned here cooperation partnership that was with the Technion, that the signature was a bit late, so I just put it into the 2024 because we didn't mention it last year. We have also some associated partnerships as part of EMJM, so congrats to the Hebrew University and Tel Chai Academic College, and of course, as usual, to Ben Gurion University for their excellent Jean Monnet collaboration and Chair of Excellence. I think this is the 4th year now. So as some of you may know, there are multiple Erasmus Plus activities in Israel. We have the mobility programs, we have cooperation projects through Key Action 2. We have Jean Monnet, European Union Studies and Research. For those of you who are interested in Jean Monnet, I encourage you, we will send the link again now. Noga will send you the link to the wonderful session that we've had with Edith from ERCA, from the agency in Brussels that manage Erasmus, that gave a lot of tips for Israeli stakeholders and higher education institutions to take part and be involved in Jean Monnet actions, but we won't be talking about this today. There are the joint and double degrees. And if you're not aware and familiar, there are also youth actions. Youth is considered between the ages of 13 and 30. A lot of higher education institutions are active in youth actions. There's youth mobility, there's capacity building in the field of youth, and there's mobility for youth workers. And I think that some of you have also organizations that are targeting youth. So this is something that I would recommend bearing in mind. When thinking about Erasmus, it's not just the programs that you're used to and familiar with. And also, there is, of course, our higher education reform experts team, which works on bringing in EU expertise and trainings for policymakers and also for professionals in the higher education system. We have 2 upcoming events that I will talk about, I will expand about in this presentation. So just to refresh everyone's memory, Israel is a non-associated third country in Erasmus+, and all collaborations, and we enjoy the external funding of Erasmus+, despite the fact that, as you've seen, through the cooperation partnerships, which are intra-EU calls, partners and stakeholders from the non-associated third countries with essential added value can take part in these intra-European calls. This means that the partner brings to the table very special expertise or experience in certain fields that need development within Europe or European countries. But on a general note, when we're talking about calls open for Israel and for countries in our region, we're actually talking about other types of projects that we will discuss today: capacity building projects, international credit mobility projects, and other projects. So I just want to say we're not such a big crowd. So if there are any questions, feel free to write them in the chat or even jump in so that I can give you the full experience. I don't like talking to a screen, so I actually enjoy your questions.
אמרת שהסשן הזה תעברי לעברית.
לא, אמרתי שאני אעבור לאנגלית.
זה היה בראשון.
אתם רוצים שנעשה סקר קצר? מי שמעדיף עברית שילחץ 1, מי שמעדיף אנגלית שילחץ 2, ואנחנו ככה נכריע את הסוגיה הזאת. 1 זה עברית. English, דניאל שובל. אוקיי. אני רואה המון אנגלית, אז אני אשאר על אנגלית, אבל אם יש צורך, אם משהו לא ברור, אתם יכולים גם לעצור אותי בעברית, ולהגיד, בואי תגידי את זה רגע בעברית, כי לא הבנו. בסדר? פשוט מי שיודע עברית לא כל כך חזק באנגלית, ומי שיודע אנגלית קשה לו מאוד עם העברית, כאילו זה יפספס המון. אז כדי להיות inclusive, I'll speak in English, but stop me if something isn't clear. So, as we said, there are the member and associated countries. There are 6 more countries, and South Mediterranean, that's our region. We're a non-associated country. Okay, and something that you might not know is within the South Mediterranean countries, which is us, Algeria, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Libya, Morocco. Also, Palestine have a national Erasmus office in Ramallah, Syria, and Tunisia. You might be surprised to know that there is a 100% success rate of regional collaboration projects that have been submitted with Israeli partners. So that's not a guarantee to win an application. You have to have a good application, but it is a signal for me to tell you that this is something that could be very relevant if it's relevant for you and you have access to this kind of collaboration. So 5 billion euros for Erasmus Plus in 2025. There was no decrease in the budget, and we see here a continued investment in the calls on a global level. Not all the calls have been published yet, but those that have been published with the funds that are allocated for that call, there was no decrease. So there is still generous funding for the different calls, and I hope that in the future we'll see the funding for all calls, and I will update you on the regional budget, because some calls have regional budgets, calls like capacity building, for example, and also virtual exchanges. So I want to remind you of the horizontal aspects that you need to take into account, at least one of them, when you're applying for Erasmus Plus. And also take these very seriously in the way you write your application and the deliverables that you aim to bring forward. Some updates on capacity building. So what is new here is that we still have funding for cross-regional projects, but it's 10% of the overall budget. So 90% of the funding would be for national and regional projects, and 10% would be for cross-regional projects. How do I know if you know? Does everybody know what a cross-regional project is? I actually can't see if you're nodding. A cross-regional project involves another country that is not our neighboring country and not an Erasmus associated country. It could be a country like Kosovo, Georgia, India, and Ghana, and countries that are from other regions. What you need to bear in mind is that each region has priorities. So our region actually ticks all of the boxes. All of the priorities of capacity building apply for our region, Region 3, but that's not the case in other regions. There has been a change in priority in regions. I know that for the Balkans, for example, they added more priorities. So if you're looking for collaboration on a cross-regional level, it would be good to update yourselves on the regional priorities of that, of where the specific institution is.
רק תסבירי את זה גם.
אוקיי,
זה בעברית.
כן, בסדר גמור. אז אני מציינת, זה משהו שהוא לא מאוד שונה משנה שעברה. גם שנה שעברה הם בעצם עשו איזושהי חלוקה. פעם פשוט היה את התקציב לכל אזור, ויכלת גם להגיש בקשה לשיתוף פעולה עם מדינה לא מהאזור שלך, כן? קרוס ריג'ונל, והם היו צריכים לעשות לעצמם סדר, איך זה מתחלק מבחינה תקציבית, אם זה יורד מהמעטפה התקציבית הזאת, של האזור הזה או של האזור ההוא. בגלל שזה עשה להם, אני לא יודעת אם זו הסיבה, אבל אני יכולה לנחש שזה עשה המון בלגן, ההגשות הרב-אזוריות, וגם אנשים עשו הגשות אסטרטגיות, לדוגמה, אזורים שיש להם תקציבים גבוהים יותר, הגישו יחד איתם, אז הם בעצם החליטו לתת X סכום לפרויקטים מהסוג הזה, ואת יתר התקציבים לנהל ברמה הלאומית או האזורית. כלומר, לנו למזרח התיכון, נגיד לצורך העניין, יש לנו 4 מיליון או 6 מיליון או 9 מיליון יורואים שאנחנו מתחרים עליהם עם כל המגישים האחרים על הזכיות, ושם זה נגמר. אם אנחנו רוצים עכשיו להגיש בקשה עם, לא משנה, עם דרום אפריקה או כל מדינה אחרת, אנחנו צריכים קודם כל לקחת בחשבון שאנחנו מתחרים בתוך 10% הזה שמיועד ל-Cross Regional Project, ואנחנו צריכים לקחת בחשבון שלכל אזור יש את ה-priorities, את הסדרי העדיפויות שלו. ל-capacity building יש priorities, ישראל והמדינות באזור, אנחנו עומדים בכל הפריוריטיז, כלומר אנחנו יכולים לעשות תחת כל אחד מהפריוריטיז את ההגשה שלנו, אבל באזורים אחרים יש פריוריטיז מסוימים שבפנים ופריוריטיז מסוימים שבחוץ. צריך לוודא בהגשה של פרויקטים, מדינות שכנות מאזורים אחרים, לוודא שאנחנו עומדים באותם פריוריטיז, כן? וגם שהרלוונטיות של קידום הנושא היא בעוצמה גבוהה וזהה בינינו לבינם. Okay, I'll go back to English. Also, there was a slight increase in the funding per project, specifically for structural reform projects, up to €1 million per project. I must say that in regards to co-financing, it's not mentioned in the program guide. So that's something that I would update yourselves on once the calls are actually published, because the capacity building calls are not published yet. Just the program guide. So some novelties, virtual exchanges and capacity building in VET have their own regional calls with their own regional budgets. It would be very interesting to see how these are managed. But essentially, last year already, it was not possible for us to collaborate in cross-regional projects in VET, only in higher education. So essentially, there's not a big change here, just the fact that it's a separate call. I think it makes it more concrete and clear that this is separate funding through a separate call, and you can apply on a national level or a regional level when it comes to VET. In virtual exchanges, as you know, regional collaboration is mandatory. We have the Impact Project, which is a very successful project with Morocco, and I recommend you learning more about it. And if you're interested in regional collaboration, we have contacts here in Israel that are working on these types of projects, and I would be happy to connect you. I'll be talking about TCAs, transnational cooperation activities, in the next slide. But I do want to remind you, there was no change it's not, there were changes in targets for Region 3. This was already last year. But I remind you that a minimum of 65% of the ICM is mobility, right? 65% is supposed to be allocated to students, and half of which need to be students with fewer opportunities. So we've been working on a report on this issue, and that's actually one of the next sessions that we're going to have with Dr. Annette Bamberg, that she actually dove into the subject of inclusion through Erasmus in Israel, and specifically ICM, to try to kind of tackle how we maintain and make sure that half of the students that we send are actually students with fewer opportunities. So she will give you a lot of insights after interviewing many international relations offices in different higher education institutions in Israel, and really give you the input on what we can do, what has been done already, what are the best practices, and how we can kind of maintain these targets and show that we take them seriously. So now, please, in your chat, press, oh wait, Jane asked something. Yes, no, you're not asking, you're saying that the 15% is a very negative change. Well, of course, because we traditionally won at least 23% of ICM. What I can say about that, Jane, is that it's just a target. So the national agencies actually can do whatever they want, if I'm being blunt about it. And in most cases, we didn't even get to the threshold of 15%. I think today we stand on something like 18% of the grants awarded, but that's something that indeed has impacted, I can imagine, has impacted and will impact, on top of other reasons, the amount of grants for mobility that Israeli institutions may or may not be granted. That's why I'd like to remind you, before I continue, that because it's a very modular program, even if you are not granted the full amount of grants, or you're not granted at all, if there's a willingness to collaborate with a higher education institution, they can manage their grants in different ways. For example, as I've mentioned in the past, there's Key Action 131, that up to 20% of outgoing EU students can be to a country of their choice, of the institution's choice. It doesn't have to be an EU member state. So they can use the grants that they are awarded for intra-European mobilities in Israel. And another point is that because they expanded the envelope to be regional, it's not just national. This is the envelope for Israel, this is the envelope for Jordan and such. They can actually change after they've been awarded grants if they're not planning or they're not able to implement the full grants in with a specific institution, whether it's in Israel or whether it's in Egypt. They can reallocate the grants and actually implement the mobility with other partners. They have that freedom. So at the end of the day, each higher education institution in Europe has an X amount of grants that they can request and be involved in our region, and then they can implement those grants how they see fit. And that gives them a bit of wiggle room if they actually apply for more grants than they intended to. Also, I can say that this might be problematic more in places like Germany and Austria, but actually there are a lot of countries that don't even reach their caps. They're not even close. I know it's there's a reason for that, and I know it could be challenging to find new partners, but it can also push you in that direction and try to apply in countries where the number of grants awarded to Israel is actually pretty low.
Now, can I ask you a question? Sorry,
Yes.
before we continue. It's Alessia Levy from the Open University. Hi. Regarding so the minimum of 65% of the funds should be allocated to student mobility, means that when we apply for an ICM grant, we have to take that into consideration. We must put we must apply for students, mainly for students, and then also for staff.
So that's a wonderful question. Thank you for that question, because I need to clarify that these are targets for the national agencies. Okay, these are not targets meant for you specifically. I mean, you can just apply for staff mobility, right? You can do that, but I think strategically you can bear in mind that the national agencies have targets, and when they get all the applications, they kind of need to arrange the awards and the grants in a way that it brings them closer to these targets. Okay? So this doesn't mean anything mandatory on your side or on your application, but if you want to be strategic about a certain application, you can, and if it's relevant, of course, you can also involve more students in the application, and also explain and justify how you will be involving students with fewer opportunities. You can always say and claim that for specific institutions, these are the students studying in our institution, okay? So you can always explain it in different ways and approaches, but it's something that I recommend addressing in your applications, the issue of inclusion.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Question in the chat box. Do you have data on ICM year by year since 2021 for Israel and other countries in our region by EU countries?
Okay, so thank you for that question. We don't have updated information since the war started. We are really looking forward to receiving that information from the European Commission. And when I have this, I would be happy to share insights with you. Maybe we'll have another meeting going forward. But for now, I don't have that data. I do know that we went down to 18% the year before. And if you're looking for information about your specific institution, how it ranks, how many collaborations you have, where are the universities that you collaborated with in the past, maybe you can refresh those connections. I would be happy to facilitate and give you whatever we have from past reports. Okay, so any other questions about this slide? Great. So, okay, let's in the chat, who knows what TCA is? Press 1. Who doesn't know what TCA is? Press 2. That's what I thought. Okay, great. Okay, so this is something that I'm happy to give you something novel, because you know so much. Sometimes you know more than me, and it's fun to kind of bring news to you. It's become challenging year to year. So transnational cooperation activities, we've been approached. I don't know if you're familiar with SALTO. Let's do the same exercise. Who knows what SALTO is? Press 1. Who doesn't know what SALTO is? Press 2. Okay, great. 1. We have a 1. Who's the 1? Afnan.
I participated. Hi, I participated in your session about the NGOs. I think this is.
Okay. So SALTO. Okay, there are different SALTOs. They are this kind of agency that is responsible for training in general. Okay, so there is SALTO Euromed, which is the Salto that is focused on our region and us included, but they focus more on youth, okay? Youth projects. So they're a relevant address for you if you're interested in having trainings or anything that has to do with collaboration in the field of youth. So Noga will send you like their website about Salto Euromed that if you're interested, get a deeper understanding of them. And also we've done an online session with them. It's a recorded session. So that too we'll share with you now in the chat and also in the summary email, don't worry, where those of you who are interested in youth participation, youth activities, I remind you that youth is 13 to 30. This is the age range. They're very interested in advancing not only projects and collaborations, but also trainings for relevant staff and organizations in Israel that work with youth. But this slide actually discusses a different Salto. There are about 7 Saltos, okay? You don't have to know all of them. Only these 2 are relevant for us. So this Salto is actually focused on training, okay? Training activities. This is their website. We'll share it with you. For some reason, it's not working. Yesterday it worked. I wanted to show you around their website, but unfortunately I can't. So what they actually do is activities that support Erasmus Plus in general, support networking, enhance your capabilities, your skills, training sessions on internationalization and tools and collaborative projects. And they also have trainings that address specific themes and priorities. It can be a training on inclusion. It can be a training on industry, academia collaboration. It could be a training on sustainability on campuses. So it's a very wide range. And these are organized by the different national agencies. And the Salto is actually a platform where the national agencies kind of promote their different training sessions and explain who is it open to. And you as stakeholders can actually take part in these networkings, in these training sessions, in these forums. And in some ways, I think you can also, I'm not sure of this, but initiate some of these trainings or at least be part of some of these trainings as speakers. But the fact that you weren't aware of this up until now because it was something that was closed for associated countries and was recently opened to also member countries. And we were approached, the NEOs, we've had a meeting with them, with the Salto that is responsible for training. And they are very, very keen on involving you in their trainings. Some of them are online, some of them are physical. I can tell you that there were Israeli organizations that the national agency, or Salto Euromed in this case, actually funded their travel to a specific seminar on inclusion. So even that happens. Sometimes there is actually funding set aside for stakeholders in outside regions. For our regions, I think it's mostly things that have to do with inclusion, of course, peace building, things like that, but not always and not necessarily. And of course, as I said, some of these events are online and they have no problem involving relevant stakeholders because there is no cost in involving you and you're relevant as an audience. So I really recommend setting up your profiles there and seeing what kind of activities are relevant for you, especially if you're looking for partners and collaborations and maybe giving your staff different trainings and skills. So this could be a wonderful platform to do that. Any questions about TCAs?
Yeah, just to make sure I got the hierarchy right. TCA is one kind of a Salto.
Exactly. They organize TCAs. Their name is, wait, I'll tell you their names. The specific Salto names. Education and training. Yeah, it's called Salto Education and Training. Salto Education and Training TCA Resource Center. That's their name. This is their website. I'm not sure it's operating because in the morning it wasn't working. And there's another Salto relevant to us. It's South Med, Salto South Med. Okay, these are the two Saltos that we can take part in. And a Salto is kind of, you know, an organization that is aimed to kind of creating the glue and infrastructure to stick together the different agencies and national agencies and priorities to create expertise and training and activities and things like that for the Erasmus Plus network. Any other question? Okay, great. So I'm curious, after hearing this, who is going to look into this issue more deeply? Just press 1. Okay, I have a few ones. I'm happy. Okay, I've promoted Salto. I'm very proud of myself. And yeah, we've actually had a survey from them, like how they can help us more. And I said that I really want to make sure that that Israeli stakeholders can really benefit from this. And they are very interested in having you submit yourselves to the different activities and taking part. So look into it and give me insights, because I myself have not been involved in this directly. So now we move on to special tips for a relevant proposal, and with extra focus on us of course, because we're talking about Israeli higher education institutions. So first of all, a tip I would like to give you, more than past years: elaborate on risk assessment. Take everything into account, you know, very high risks, very low risks, medium-sized risks. Don't just settle for a specific type of risk. Go doomsday, okay, in your risk assessment, because even if you feel like everything's fine now, there is no security threat in this area, in that area, we can just go online. Of course, there is also the evaluator's imagination, okay, and perception of how it is like to manage things here. And things need to be very, very, very clear. You need to really say what you have set up, how you're going to manage the different aspects, and really assess the small risks, the medium-sized risk, and the very, very, very high risks that could occur within your project, okay? And how you plan on addressing these very, very, like, go into the details, into the scenarios, because wonderful projects have lost valuable points, and I can't stress enough how important it is, because these are competitive calls, okay? If you lose 5 points on something, it could be the reason why you haven't received the grant. So please elaborate on risk assessment. And if you need help brainstorming what could be a potential risk, you're welcome to approach us. You're welcome to write, and we have a WhatsApp group where we kind of pick each other's brain on things. Do it. That's my first point. Second point is inclusion and pressing national needs. This is a priority. I mean, again, going into how evaluators read your proposals and what they also find and see as the major conflicts and the major needs within our region, and specifically in Israel, that's something that needs to be involved one way or another in your application. It doesn't just have to be a sentence or two. It needs to be part of the reasoning for why your project is relevant. It needs to be part of the reasoning why the EU should invest in it. It needs to be part of the reasoning why the project is innovative and the project presents real and pressing needs and priorities in Israel. Yes. My next point is, and I've said this before, like, of course, statistics are hard to argue with, and 100% success rate in regional collaboration is something that you can't ignore. Of course, if it's not relevant to you or your project, I wouldn't force it, right? And maybe there are ways also involving a regional aspect in a national project. That's something that you can also do. Common democratic values, also something that is very relevant to us. So when we look at all of the horizontal aspects, you can understand that in each country of the EU's neighboring countries, different aspects are more pressing, different aspects are more clear and apparent within different countries, and different aspects are financed or not financed by other bodies and organizations. So that's something that also I would put an emphasis on. So this, all these points come together, right? Focus on areas where Israel is strategically weaker than the EU. So if I would have a capacity building project on innovation and bring like a Greek college from somewhere, not insulting any Greek college and their innovation capacities, but the Technion, for example, with like a small Greek college on some island in Greece, I would say as a EU evaluator, do the Greece here really need to promote innovation in the Technion? That doesn't make sense to me. So try to really think of the aspects and areas where the EU expertise is relevant and national needs are met. So also a point I want to make,
Sorry, but don't we need to show our expertise to share with someone else?
Thank you for that question.
It's the opposite.
No, so it's not actually. So let me kind of explain even further. When we're talking about capacity building projects or projects that have regional envelopes, meaning that you want to invest in the capacities of the Israelis, right? So it means that the Israelis are weak in some aspects and they need resources and knowledge and experience from the EU stakeholders. That is the balance. That should be the balance. But in the beginning of my slide, I showed cooperation partnerships. These are intra-EU calls, okay? I haven't even discussed them here. These are calls that actually want to promote the higher education institutions and the higher education capacities within the EU. And then the Israeli partners there, they need to have the extra added value because they actually bring to the table expertise and experience that the Europeans don't have. They want it. So because the Israeli partners there have essential added value, they were allowed to enter a closed call for EU participants because of their added value. But that is the exception. I will say that, for example, if we're talking about the SIFI project, which promotes public health, right? And they involved all the higher education institutions that teach public health, and they involved the doctors union, the National Doctor Union. Of course, the added value here is that if you actually change the study program for all the students in Israel that are studying public health, then of course the added value here is that we have them in the table, and we also have the doctors union that have essential added value because they know what are the needs of the market and what are the needs of the sector, right? So I'm not saying just have a teacher training college work on degrees in optometry. No, of course, like it has to make sense and it has to be relevant for the DNA and the goals and the strategic goals of the institution and the capacities that they already have and want to build. But I'm talking about the relationship between the EU and Israel here. if we're talking about capacity building projects, and if we're talking about regionally funded projects, right, like virtual exchanges and others, we want to see that the EU partners have something to bring to the table, and they are the ones that, of course, always there's reciprocity, always, but it needs to be a relevant partner. And one of the points is they look at the consortium. The consortium needs to be a strong consortium, a relevant consortium. Why bring these people together? What is the potential? Okay, that's something that we look at. I hope that was clear. Any questions about yeah, Rhonda?
I just want to add one more thing to make it stronger. With capacity building projects, you have to think, how is my institution going to be different and better from participating in this project? And what impact is this project going to have on my institution? And unless, if you excel in innovation and technology and have a project and want to promote a project in technology and innovation, it has a very small chance of being selected, because how are you going to be impacted? So what you need to ask yourself, where do we need to be impacted in? How is this project going to make a difference in my institution? And how are the European expertise going to contribute to that? Because they're supposed to be the experts and we're supposed to be the receivers of the expertise. And I'll be willing to elaborate, and if anybody needs any understanding, we're always open at Gordon College to provide advice and support with any of this.
And I suggest taking her up on that offer, because Rhonda is really like on my speed dial, and really like a lot of knowledge there, and of course everything that you've added is very, very relevant. I was also asked about before in the previous session about the number of pages per application. So I checked this, and for low value projects, meaning 60,000 and under, you need just up to 40 pages. For high level, so that's 4 million euros and above, it's 120. And for everything in between, it's 70 pages as it was before. So I was asked this about EMDM. EMDM is just 40 pages because it's 60,000 euros grant. Okay. So I don't know if that person is still here, but I answered your question. So how to find partners? I can tell you that this is the biggest challenge for everyone, everywhere. How do we find the partners? So before I go to these very helpful tools, I want to say that the answer might be just under your nose. I mean, your staff go to conferences, they publish joint research, joint articles and books with their colleagues. It's a very collaborative industry, so the partners might already be in contact with you. So you should know that Erasmus is a very, very common framework for collaboration within Europe, and Europeans are very much, I think, we're on our break. Okay, so I need to finish the presentation soon. Okay, so Europeans are very much aware and know a lot about Erasmus, and you can involve them and ask them, hey, why don't we collaborate through an Erasmus project? And that's something that would be very easy to bring forward if they're interested and want to do it. So these are different links to where you can find partners. I must tell you, and I don't know if you're using this, but there is option to publish that you're looking for a partner search within specific calls. Each call has a partner search platform, and also people publish that they're looking for expertise, and you can filter those searches in different ways and find relevant projects that you can actually jump on into. There's the Erasmus Plus results platform, where you can filter different projects that have already been awarded grants, and there you can find relevant partners or experienced partners that have already had experience in specific fields. And we have our own partner search database, which we disseminate to EU counterparts that are contacting us in search of partnerships. And we've added an element where you can see the date that they actually put in their details, so you can know if this is someone that recently wrote down their details, maybe a few years ago, and then you can also approach them in the most relevant way. So this is the link that where you can see like the backstage of decentralized calls. You can see the platform where your different EU partners actually submit their calls. So you can actually log into that through your top user. Of course, if you actually apply, you won't be granted because it's just for decentralized calls, for national calls. These are the two events coming up. We have a conference on behavior change to promote sustainable development goals on campus. It's supposed to be very interesting. We'll share the link with you. And also an event that hopefully will happen next week on diversity and inclusion policy in higher education. So thank you for your attention. Now we have a short break.